don't worry about the LGBT. It's our fault for turning our movement into a sandwich. All right? And I got a tough act to follow. We saw Sarah Palin this week. I hope I can be more articulate. Yeah, that was a heck of a speech, wasn't it? That was a sight to behold. I will try to be more articulate than that, but I don't know. And anyway, let's begin. And I want to just thank everybody for coming out tonight. That's really awesome that you're here. That's terrific. And it's just an honor to be here. It really is. In the 16th year of the 21st century, we are a nation divided, financially, culturally, geographically, and politically. There are distinct differences between the Democratic and Republican parties. We have two visions of America, and only one will prevail. It is up to us, you and me, to make a difference and ensure that progressive triumphs over regressive. This election is crucial for our future and critically important for the direction of this great nation. This election is about who we are, what we stand for, where we are going, and what we truly believe in. I am proudly an aggressive progressive. That's what I call it, an aggressive progressive, because if we don't fight, we cannot win. If we don't stand up for our values, we will be devalued. This week, two major developments highlighted how key the upcoming elections truly are. In the first, the charity Oxfam released a new study in Davos that said 62 people owned as much wealth as 3.5 million people at the bottom half of the world's income scale. Jeffrey Winters, a political scientist at Northwestern University right here, described it this way in the New York Times. He said, "These are unprecedented levels of stratification in all of human history, not in a decade, not in a century, in all of human history. Whether compared to the ancient Roman Empire or authoritarian dictatorships that exert near total control of a country's resources, no other system has concentrated wealth as much as this system has." That's alarming. That is unbelievable. We must do something about that. And a second major development, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and NASA said that last year was the hottest on record ever. This goes all the way back to 1880. The second hottest year, 2014. 10 out of the hottest 12 months ever were last year. And we have Republicans who are still saying it doesn't exist with climate change. That is crazy. That is absurd. That puts us all at risk. Now, which party do you think is best going to tackle economic inequality and climate change? I'll give you a hint. It's probably the party that believes they exist. Maybe that's the party. Oxfam's alarming study is in line with other disturbing economic trends which are caused or exacerbated by reckless consolidation, monopolization, and deregulation. Here are a few examples. While we bicker and have arguments about food stamp recipients, there are $12 billion in annual subsidies for corporate meals and entertainment. 158 families in this nation have given over half the donations this year. Amazing. The Washington Post reports the top-tier Republican donors this year will pay $1.3 million for access to political candidates. The Democratic Party will charge $1.6 million per family for insider access. In such a money maelstrom, how can we, everyday average people, have access to the political process and our concerns heard by those at the top? It's getting tougher and tougher and more difficult every day, and we've got to step up and change that. The New York Times reports that median CEO compensation in 2013 was $13.9 million, a 9% increase from 2012. The average CEO of a Standard & Poor's 500 company was paid 216 times more than the median employee at their companies. They were paid just 20 times more on average in the 1950s, according to Bloomberg Business Week. So we've gone from, at the heyday of our economy, in the 50s, 20 times more for CEOs to 216 times more. Are they really that much better? Are they performing that much better than in the 50s? I don't think so. USA Today reports the 100 largest CEO retirement packages are worth a combined $4.9 billion, equal to the entire retirement account savings of 41% of Americans. 100 people have more in retirement than 41% of all Americans. That's outrageous. A shocking 95% of income growth since the recovery has started has gone to the super wealthy. Now, I'm not against the wealthy. In fact, I'd love to be rich, and if anybody's handing out checks, I will gladly take them. But I don't take issue with the wealthy. I take issue with the greedy. And that's what we're seeing coming from the Republican Party. This inexcusable wealth gap is not necessary for job growth. It is not necessary for the economy to expand. It is not necessary for anything at all, other than making a few people extraordinarily wealthy at the expense of everyone else. America is better and stronger when we have a strong, solid middle class and we have union jobs that pay people wages and give them the lives they deserve. People ask, how did we get here? How did this happen to us? It happened slowly. Hedrick Smith, the author of Who Stole the American Dream, vividly explains how this happened. In the early 1970s, corporate America said, you know what, we're going to rewrite the rules to our favor. And they're going to exert financial muscle to make that happen. The number of corporate offices that lobbied leapfrogged from a mere 170 in 1971 to 2,455 a decade later. By 1978, these 2,000 plus corporate interests in Washington had total staffs of 50,000 people. That is bigger than Burlington, Vermont, where I lived before here, by 10,000. 9,000 lobbyists, 8,000 public relations executives. In fact, these business interests outnumbered members of Congress 130 to 1. For every member of Congress, there were 130 lobbyists. And you wonder why you're not being heard. How many people here have their own lobbyists? I don't. The results? What are the results of this? The New York Times had an article about the Oxfam report this week, and it stated, alarmingly, a global network of tax havens contributed to the wealth divide by allowing the rich to hide trillions of dollars in assets from their countries and governments. So when powerful and wealthy conservative interests say we can't help the people, they say we can't afford to make America better, the data says we can if they stop hiding their trillions of dollars and bring it back into the economies that serve us all. We must win and take back this country before our country is unrecognizable. Aside from the importance of the White House, the Supreme Court hangs in the balance while unbalanced minds fight for the Republican nomination. Elections matter, and as Donald Trump likes to say, there are winners and losers. And in one sense, he's right, because if a Republican goes to the White House, America and Americans will be the losers. Of course, all politics, as we know, are local. It is the man who braves the cold to knock on doors on a snowy day. It is the woman who makes so many phone calls, her fingers ache and her ears numb. It is the determined student who goes out on campus and tries to persuade the other students and hands out flyers and tells the truth about what's going on in this country. It is the dedicated precinct captain who organizes and executes a winning plan. I want to thank the Elgin Democrats for having me here tonight. It is an honor and a privilege. And I am grateful to each and every one of you for your warm hospitality tonight. You all have been just excellent so far, and just really a joy. As we move forward in these elections, the good news, and there's a lot of good news, we've got a lot going for us. if we are willing to stand up, of course, and toot our own horn and talk about our accomplishments. And sometimes Democrats don't do that. But we need to start telling everyone what we have done, what we have accomplished. We have amazing candidates, dedicated volunteers, and most of all, a strong record to run on. For example, President Barack Obama saved the auto industry and dug our economy out of the George W. Bush abyss. On this president's watch, 14 million new jobs have been created, unemployment cut in half, and 17 million new people now have health care. New York Times columnist Timothy Egan points out that at no time since St. Ronald Reagan's 8 years, unemployment rate was lower than it is today. So no time during Reagan's years was unemployment lower than now at 5%. And this is after Obama was handed a disastrous economy that was almost a direct line to a Great Depression. Reagan lauded a federal deficit of 3.4% of gross national product. By last fall, Obama had done better, posting a deficit of 2.5% of GDP. But apparently Republicans, oh, the sky is falling, Obama this. I mean, Sarah Palin was even blaming him for her own family's disasters this week. It's pretty good what Obama has done. That is pretty good for what Republicans derisively describe as a business-hating socialist from Kenya. But it's not just the success of this amazing President Barack Obama. It is a Democratic Party in general that has succeeded over many years. The research of economists Alan Blinder and Mark Watson show that since 1947, the economy under Democratic presidents grew an average of 4.35% per year. Under Republicans, only 2.54%. So I don't want to hear about the great Republican economy and fiscal conservatism. The proof is in the pudding, the proof is in the numbers. The economy is better when Democrats are in charge. Yeah. Over the whole period that I just mentioned, from 1947, the Democrats held office, and only 8 quarters were in recession out of 49. So Republicans out of 49 quarters, Democrats held the White House during only 8 recession quarters. That's amazing. The Republicans are clearly the party of recession. And if it weren't for Barack Obama, it would have been depression. Democrats succeed because we ensure regulated free markets. Republicans believe in fraud markets and false markets and failed markets. Conservative treats markets like casinos. Not that there's anything wrong with the casino tonight. But they play high-risk games with your hard-earned money and call that fiscal responsibility. You know, their fiscal responsibility is looking a lot like their personal responsibility of late. New York Times columnist and Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman, he wrote, Obama's record compares favorably on a number of indicators with that of George W. Bush. In particular, despite all the talk of job-killing policies, private sector employment is 8 million higher than it was when Barack Obama took office, twice the job gains achieved under his predecessor before the recession struck. At the very moment our economy is healing, the last thing we need is a return to trickle-down voodoo economics. We don't need the Republican ethics of greed and graft and selflessness and solipsism that enriches the very few at the expense of the many. We don't need careless consolidation, delirious deregulation, and the dismantling of common sense regulation on Wall Street that brought us the crash in 2008. We don't want to return to bubble-headed ideas that will lead to a bubble-bursting economy. We've been there, we've seen that. We are not going back in this election cycle. All one has to do to see the fecklessness and failure of Republicans is look at the governors. Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal turned a $1 billion surplus into a $1.6 billion deficit. He was so bad that a Democrat replaced him in Louisiana. Amazing. Perhaps the worst governor of all, though, is Governor Sam Brownback of Kansas, although Browner's kind of trying to catch up. The Republican legislature in Kansas projects a $190 million hole. At the end of last year, Sam Brownback had an abysmal 18% approval rating. I guess when you're that low, it should be called a disapproval rating. Even Barack Obama in red Kansas had a 10-point higher approval rating than Sam Brownback.
Wow.
Amazing. Aside from Bridgegate, which is Chris Christie's most famous for, he's been a complete disaster in New Jersey. An editorial in the Daily Record of New Jersey said, quote, "The state's economy stinks. At a time when most other states in the nation are doing far better, New Jersey has recovered to 61% of its jobs since the beginning of the Great Recession, while neighboring states have gotten all their jobs back and many more. Thanks to the miserly and miserable policies of Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, residents of Flint, Michigan are poisoned from lead in their filthy, disgusting drinking water that they did nothing about. I call this Republican mismanagement Watergate, but another Republican already took that label. It is time for Rick Snyder to resign. And as soon as that. How can we forget union-busting Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker? Our lovely neighbor to the north. He promised to create 250,000 jobs. He came woefully short, creating only 56% of the jobs promised. That left Wisconsin at 35th in jobs creation. Thanks, Governor. Good job. Even as Miami Beach is sinking, and I lived there for a year, it's really going underwater. You've got Governor Rick Scott, who sent out a memo forbidding state employees from mentioning the terms global warming or climate change. So much for science. Indiana Governor Mike Pence promoted a Don't Serve the Gays bill that gained international attention and freaked out business, and they threatened at corporate America to withdraw business from that state. Speaking of bigotry, demonstrating an extraordinary, disgusting form of it, just last week, Maine Governor Paul LePage talked about drug dealers coming up from Massachusetts and New York to impregnate white girls. Very lovely. And then he said, oh, I just should have said mayonnaise. This is what this party has come to. And last, and probably least, Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner. You know, he's in the back. No. I'm in his wine club.
He's a comedian.
And last and probably least, as I said, Red Rauner. And this guy is a nightmare. In his first year, he has no major accomplishments. And due to his arrogance and intransigence, the state has been without a budget for more than 7 months. His policies have been brutal and cruel and targeted the most vulnerable populations in the state. And now he's holding Chicago public schools hostage for his turnaround and stab you in the back agenda, which I don't want any part of, and I know you don't either. His obsession with destroying unions and turning Illinois into a work-for-less state has gone from odd to bizarre to a full-blown fetish. I don't know what this unions ever did to this guy. They certainly didn't keep him from getting rich.
Yeah.
In a scathing article yesterday in the Chicago Sun-Times, columnist Neil Steinberg said that Bruce Rauner did the impossible. He made Rod Blagojevich look good. According to Steinberg, at least Rod Blagojevich never hurt thousands of real Illinoisans, from struggling students who suddenly can't pay for their college tuition to hard-working parents who have to worry about losing child care. He didn't try to knock cups of milk out of the hands of preschoolers, nor did Blagojevich join a wasp's nest of Republican governors nationwide, embarring desperate Syrian refugees whom the nation isn't admitting anyway. He didn't virtually push people out of their wheelchairs, nor stiff honest creditors. Bruce Rauner has done all of those things, he concluded.
Yes.
In 4 days, Bruce Rauner is going to give his State of the State address. Do you know what the hardest job in America is? to be his speechwriter. Could you imagine him sitting down and telling you as a speechwriter, I want you to write an hour speech on my accomplishments. Talk about writer's block. You're talking about 15 seconds of hamburger and an hour of hamburger helper. There's no there. What could you say if you're the speechwriter? He squandered an entire year, learned nothing, and miraculously still thinks he's the emperor. And the sad part is Bruce Rauner is a highlight of the Illinois Republican Party. The other Republicans making news in 2015 were former House Speaker Dennis Hastert and Aaron Shaw. What a lovely group they've created with their family values. And then there's Senator Mark Kirk. An embarrassing human gaffe machine of late. Have you noticed how quiet he's been recently? He was everywhere and he's disappeared. He seems to be auditioning for the Invisible Man. Clearly his handlers are saying that when it comes to Mark Kirk, less is more, and on election day he will be no more. Goodbye, Mark Kirk. On foreign affairs, we also have a lot to be proud of. Yes, the world is a dangerous place, it is a scary place. But thankfully we have a president who tries diplomacy first and bombing as a last resort. Mitch, you're supposed to play Give Peace a Chance when I sit there. No. Obama has also opened up Cuba, has avoided war with Iran, signing a landmark nuclear deal. Instead of the United States sending soldiers to Iran to fight, Iran is sending nuclear fuel to Russia and sending U.S. hostages home to America. Amazing. While this delicate relationship requires more work, Iran remains a very dangerous country, obviously, one we must watch. But the way Obama has handled this, smartly, taking the long view, illustrates the stark difference between Democratic and Republican leadership, and that's why we need a president who's a Democrat, as well as a Senate and Congress and in Springfield. It's a completely different way of doing business these days. Obama also worked with the rest of the world on a historic deal to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. There is no issue that will have a greater impact on our future, and only Democrats can lead the way. Because the Republicans are owned by big oil, and they are rented by the Koch brothers and the pollution lobby. Contrast the maturity and success in international affairs with the hotheads and blustering blowhards on the Republican presidential bozo bus. Let us be clear. Based on their own statements, a vote for a Republican for the White House is a vote for war. Make no mistake about it. Their own statements tell you that. When it comes to human rights, there is a gaping chasm between the two parties. The Democrats believe that Black Lives Matter, and they are working to create a fair justice system, from policing to sentencing to prison reform. The Republicans often believe in turning a blind eye to injustice, pretending racial disparities do not exist, and privatizing prisons to enrich their friends with enormous profits at the expense of people. It's supposed to be a correctional facility, not a facilitation of money to a few people at the expense of our population. The Democratic Party, both nationally and in the state of Illinois, was a driving force in favor of marriage equality and equal rights for LGBT people. President Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Hillary Clinton have fought for LGBT people as part of this administration at home and abroad. Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley also have terrific records on LGBT rights. The worst Democrat is better, it seems, than the best Republican on this issue. On Thursday, Joe Biden was in Davos and urged the world's leading corporations to exert their powerful influence on governments to ensure LGBT citizens are treated fairly with dignity and respect. Meanwhile, Barack Obama has done more for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people than any president in our history. Thank you, Mr. President. Now, we can talk, as I often do on my show, about how awful the Republicans are. Believe me, they give me a lot of fodder, a lot of material. I never wake up and say, will I have something to talk about? As long as the bozo bus is there, the script writes itself, the script writes itself. But we will win this election on what we stand for. And as Democrats, as liberals, as progressives, we are the backbone of freedom. We are the defender of personal liberty, the protector of minorities from persecution, the guarantor of free speech, religious pluralism, and the nurturer of liberal movements across the globe. Far from believing in nothing, as Republicans like to say, whatever and wherever progressive values prevail, civilizations flourish, and people thrive. And that's just a fact. Look at the different states. Progressive values encourage exploration. We like education, not indoctrination. We revere science and celebrate inquisitive minds. We see knowledge as power and the key to our future. Meanwhile, modern conservatism is a Ponzi scheme. It consists of the greedy using inflammatory wedge issues to trick the needy into giving tax cuts to the greedy and voting against their own interest. We must persuade people that this whole conservative movement is working against them and bring them over to our side, because we are the ones looking out for them. It sure ain't Rush Limbaugh, and it sure isn't Bruce Rauner. I saw a very interesting study this week. A new survey by University of Massachusetts researcher Matthew McWilliams found that 49% of likely Republican primary voters score in the top quarter on the authoritarian scale, more than twice as many as Democratic voters. So that's a big difference. I'm so proud that we are better than this. We don't dumpster dive for dangerous demagogues who promise to make America great again. We have some standards when we go for candidates. We don't go for people like Donald Trump or Ted Cruz. They claim they're going to make America great, but they're going to really bring us down into the gutter. And if you listen to the language and the bigotry that they have put forth this year, it is astounding, it is outrageous, and is something we should all be very concerned about. Instead of Donald Trump rhetoric, instead of Mike Huckabee rhetoric, instead of Ted Cruz rhetoric, instead of the lies of the Carly Fiorina, I don't know who's ever told the truth. We fight for fairness and expand liberty to ensure America lives up to its ideals. We appeal to the nation's better angels. Rather than demonizing those who are different, are basing our immigration plan on raw and rank bigotry. Progressives, Democrats, we are the hope of the world, emboldened and embodied by the Statue of Liberty. We are the poetic promise of the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution. We strive to live the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. We are the heirs to the Civil Rights Movement. We are the soaring promise of the New Deal. We are the dreamers who fought for the Great Society. An America led by Democrats is healthier, happier, saner, and safer. Freedom and fairness, leadership and liberty, hope and happiness, dignity and decency. That is who we are, and for the good of Illinois and the nation, we must prevail. Yeah! Before I go, I must mention the Democratic primary. It's very important. We have three wonderful candidates in the race. Each person in this room supports one of them. And no doubt you will fight for your horse to win the Derby. We have a surprisingly tight race in the Iowa caucus, and we have a very tight race in New Hampshire. The nature of close contests is sometimes they get ugly, sometimes they have an edge, sometimes they become a little bit nasty. And in the weeks ahead, we are going to see the candidates vividly highlighting their differences. They will not only discuss, as earlier in the race, their attributes and fitness for office, but the perceived deficiencies of their opponents. Only one person is going to win. And this is going to lead to a lot of hurt feelings. It's going to leave a bad taste in the mouth of some Democrats. But remember, this is politics, and no matter how high-minded we try to be, inevitably, sometimes it gets a little low because we've got power at stake. And no matter how upset we are if our candidate does not win, we can't cut our nose off to spite our face. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. For the sake of this country we love, for the future of our children, for the necessity of the Supreme Court, which is so critical, for creating a peaceful and prosperous tomorrow, we must unify and rally around the eventual Democratic nominee. It might not be the one we preferred, but my God, please promise me, please pledge to me that you will rally and you will vote for and work for whoever gets the Democratic nomination. Because President Trump and President Cruz are not an option. If you thought George W. Bush was bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. So let's stand up and stand tall and stand strong and bring back the American dream by fighting for the America we dream of and the incredible nation we know we can be. If we stand together, united, we shall rise. Let's get them, Democrats.